In this episode of CARPe Diem.
With nearly 300,000 deaths in Canada last year, prepping for death has become an important part of our lives. How do you plan for it? How do you wish to be remembered? We'll answer those questions on today's episode.
CARPe Diem, seizing the day for Canadians as we age.
Welcome. Before we begin today's show, let's have some fun with Leah Bolton in this week's Zippy Zoomer.
Look at all the sweet stuff, and we are back here with our latest and greatest Zippy Zoomer. This is Mary Carter. She refuses to retire. She's 83 years old, and she works 7 days a week.
And I think you deserve a toffee.
All right. Woo.
Try one of those.
That is really good.
Before, I was in Steveston for 35 years.
So if you were in Richmond for that long, why didn't you just retire it?
I didn't want to.
You work 7 days a
Well,
week.
it really isn't working. This is, you know, it's a place to be, to enjoy myself.
Too small for your head.
This
is for a child.
That was a kid. And meet people. Would you be nice to the camera for me, please?
I'll be nice to you for the camera. How would that be?
What kind of stuff do you sell? Things from the UK?
Yes. It's mostly stuff from the UK. We sell groceries and as well as sweets, and now we've got a few football stuff, British football. Yeah, yes. We don't call it soccer in England.
No.
And Marks and Spencer's beef. No.
No.
It's good stuff.
When I retired from North Vancouver, I started helping Mary out in the shop.
Also, you do a bit of traveling together. Is this true?
Yes, yeah. We'd like to do more.
You're probably banned from a few countries though now, right?
Mary's created a few international incidents, so.
Oh, my tummy. I think I ate too many candies. Mary, give me a hand. It's been a blast hanging out with Mary here, but I'm going to have to visit the dentist soon. If you have a Zoomer to nominate, don't forget to nominate them at zippyzoomer@carpe.ca. I'm going to eat this, and in the meantime, we're going to head back to the studio.
Death and taxes, the only two certainties in life. Let's dive right into today's topic, which is prepping for death. Rose, why do we need to do it?
It's all about peace of mind. There are, of course, as you say, death and taxes, but the reality is if we don't talk about it, if we don't share this information with our family and our loved ones, we're going to take these secrets to our grave, and that's probably the worst thing we could do.
You know, we plan for all these major events in our life. We plan for children, our weddings, sometimes more than once. We plan for retirement. So doesn't it make sense that we would plan for our death?
You know, it so does, but it amazes me. We have CARPe members in their 80s who haven't got a will, who haven't even taken steps to think about what they want for a memorial service. So really more needs to be done.
Well, I look at my friends who are in their 80s, and I would love to place the blame squarely on the shoulders of that generation, but it's not them, it's their kids. They go to have this conversation, and their kids don't want to talk about it. It's absolutely anathema. So we have to normalize this and make it approachable.
It's not comfortable, but you can absolutely make it comfortable, and it'll really benefit everybody at the end of the day.
You know, you're so right, because if we don't take steps to have a will, if we don't take the time to plan a memorial service, then it's a real hardship for those that we leave behind, our family members and our friends, and we don't get to have those conversations that are so critical.
And don't leave it to the lawyer to have the conversation. Nobody wants to have this information from the lawyer for the first time. We're the least comforting source, no matter how well-intentioned we may be.
Or with the funeral director, how many times have I sat across the table from a family that goes, I wish Mom had just told me if she wanted to be cremated or buried. I wish I knew if they wanted a service or not.
Well, then I'm lucky because my mother had all those arrangements. We're going to take a little break. When we come back, we'll be discussing pre-planning in detail.
Still ahead on CARPe Diem.
Did you ever prearrange a funeral?
If I could afford it, yeah.
CARPE Diem. Seizing the day for Canadians as we age.
In this segment, we're talking about the need to pre-plan our final journey. And Jen?
Well, let's start off by saying that whether you have prearranged or not, the first question the funeral director is going to ask on the phone, one of the first ones, is who is named as executor in the will? If there is no will, then we start going down a long list of who the next legal representative may be, because that is the person in charge of fulfilling those arrangements or making those arrangements. So you don't want to be searching for a will.
And so this goes to what you were saying earlier about make sure people know what your wishes are and where to find them. I think as a high level, it's important that people have a very, very glossary understanding of what the key documents in a simple estate plan are, so that they know which document to look for, because lawyers like to make things confusing. The documents don't always say at the top, will, or if I'm dead, please read this. It may be buried in a stack of documents. The main document that you need at this stage, as you say, is the will.
Exactly.
But it's not always going to be labeled that way. If
and
you
a
see
lot of people think that power of attorney is still valid at time of death, and that's not the case.
Most of the time it ends with us, and so the role of the power of attorney concludes and the role of the executor starts up. In BC, there's another quirky document called a representation agreement, and in other jurisdictions it's often called a power of attorney for healthcare. Those ones thankfully are usually labeled well and say representation agreement at the top. If you're in a situation where you're already dealing with the death of a loved one, that is no longer a relevant document. You want to keep digging to find that will. And if you can't find it, you can go to any lawyer or notary in BC and they will help you track it down by searching various registries.
And I think what our members can really take from this is not necessarily that they'll pass a quiz on the difference between a power of attorney and a will, but that they need to come to a lawyer, not only to make sure they have their will or their power of attorney, but especially if they have someone in their life who has a disability, and they want to make sure they do the planning for that individual.
And I think what's really overwhelming is you've called the funeral director and they tell you that they start with the question of who's the executor, and now you don't know where to go. So circling back to what we were talking about earlier, just make sure that when you do your will or you make your pre-arrangements, you've told whoever your executor is first that they are the executor. So tell your key people what their role is and tell them where your documents are, so that when they're put on the spot and asked for it, they say, oh, I know exactly where to go for that.
And so critical to have the conversation with the lawyer, because it does compel people to make those decisions, which sometimes are uncomfortable. Because if they haven't, it may be that your closest relative is the one making decisions about people that you really care about, and you may not have talked to that person for a while. You might be estranged, or you might have very different values. So things could end up very differently than how you want.
Speaking of comfortable, we went and asked you, are you comfortable making your final plans?
Would you ever prearrange a funeral?
If I could afford it, yeah.
I haven't done it. I must admit I thought about it once when I heard what a friend's funeral cost. I thought, no, not me. Mind you, they had the full thing, Right. Oh yeah, oh boy.
It just actually brings up mortality, and mortality is one of those things which none of us want to think about. And it's real.
I think if you know where you're going and you feel confident in I have a lot of faith. I'm not afraid to pass away, and I think that if you're not struggling with that, then you're not going to wrestle with that fear, and you're going to be more prepared, and fear causes us to avoid a lot of things.
I heard fear and expense being barriers to the pre-planning, and Jennifer, I'm sure you deal with this every day.
All the time. Whether you want something really simple or elaborate, the important thing is that you reflect on what you want. Go to your funeral provider, talk about your options. You secure those items in a contract. Then you start recording all the important details, like where to get a hold of your executor or family members that maybe live internationally, what organizations you'd like donations to go to, and other details you want. The place that you would not record these is in the will.
And so important to have a will, so important to do your pre-planning for your arrangements, but also really critical to pre-plan your service. I mean, if you're somebody who loves Led Zeppelin, you know, make sure they're playing Stairway to Heaven and not Blessed Assurance at your memorial service.
You know your music,
Absolutely.
That's wonderful.
Even though that may not be what your family's wanting to hear, it removes any doubt and they sure feel good about it instead of sitting there in the arrangement room going, I wonder if Mom would have liked this, I wonder if Dad would have liked this.
When we come back from this break, Dean Atwell plans his final event.
Still ahead on Carpe Diem.
We have some families that choose to do just little things where they're going to walk in and say, oh my gosh, I remember that Dean loved this.
Mine would probably be a beer mug.
There you go.
Carpe Diem. Seizing the day for Canadians as we age.
Welcome back. Let's find out what planning your own final event looks like.
We're here in South Surrey at Victory Memorial Park learning about funeral arrangements. Now, most people find it hard to talk about, but there is a growing trend when it comes to funeral planning and death.
We do have the in-ground options. We have the columbariums and the niche walls as well. We even have little private, almost estates for families to be in their own little individual house or apartment, if you will. Here we have a beautiful grand room, which we host most of our events in. We have a reception room downstairs as well. And we do have a family room and visitation down the side hall also. As you can see, we are an on-site cemetery with a crematorium as well. So when your loved one comes into our care here, they stay here until their final resting place.
Thank you for calling Victory Memorial Park.
So what does this allow you to do, Teresa?
This actually allows us to present all the options to you, and then you can just let us know what works for you and what doesn't, and that's how we'll build what sort of celebration would be best for you.
When I'm talking about my funeral, I'm thinking a celebration of life. So what are the kind of things that I'd be looking at?
We would definitely try to personalize it in the sense of food, music, keepsakes, takeaways for people to take home, what your hobbies and interests were.
Keepsakes? Sorry, I'm going to stop you right there.
Yes.
So, like at a wedding when you have keepsakes on the table?
Absolutely.
That's interesting. I've never considered that.
Yeah.
So like what? What would that be?
I can show you. We have some families that choose to do little keepsake personalized wine bottles, golf ball insignias on them, flowers to take home and plant in memory of their loved one. Anything like that, just little things where they're going to walk in and say, oh my gosh, I remember that Dean loved this.
Mine would probably be a beer mug.
There you go.
Now, it may sound morbid, but planning my funeral has been a positive experience. It has been emotional, but overall I'd say I'd recommend it. Back to the studio.
That was really an interesting take on it. Can I ask you something? What is the difference between a funeral and a memorial?
A funeral, traditionally, there's a casket present, there's a set order of service, may take place in the funeral home, at the church, whereas a memorial, it can be a celebration of life, service of remembrance. It takes different shapes depending on that person and what the family is wanting.
Whether there's a religious component or purely secular, and you can personalize it and bring in things that are important to them?
Absolutely. And you know, the role of the funeral director really has evolved. Now we're more event planners because what we've determined is that the more meaningful and personalized the service, the more healing it is actually to the family. They want to celebrate your life. You're a significant part. We hear a lot of people saying, I don't want a service. Well, that's our job to say, it's really not about you. The service is for the living. They want to celebrate your life.
When we think about memorials, there's a number of really critical things that they do. I mean, first and foremost, a memorial gives people, family and friends, a place to grieve. But then it also provides some comfort, a way to remember the individual, whether it's by planting a flower or remembering key words that the person said or a song and singing the song that they loved.
That's right, and people shouldn't be intimidated by these elaborate services they may be seeing. And we recently just watched Aretha Franklin's, and Boy, I mean, 3 different caskets, 3 different outfit changes. It was amazing. But you know, it can be as simple as incorporating a favorite flower into the bouquets that you have present, or just having a favorite story shared. And Dean knows, Dean, as we saw, he wants a celebration of life. And he, already by giving his family permission and some ideas of what they want, that is such a great gift that he can give them.
And the beer mug.
Yes.
Talk about personalized. Some of us have thought this through. Let's watch this.
My son, he knows. No church thing, no service, nothing. Just maybe a celebration, one good party.
We're not going to have a funeral. We decided we're not going to have one. We're just going to be cremated, and then probably the money that we save on the burial, well, I'll take the kids, or my wife will take the kids. We'll go someplace on a vacation.
I wonder if they have these wishes well documented. And Jen, this is exactly what we're talking about. You have to have these things written down.
What good is it if you don't have them written down? And like one of the viewers said, is that, you know, they've determined they just want to be cremated and they're going to save on burial. Well, there's thousands of people right now who have urns sitting at home and they don't know what to do with them.
When my dad died, we'd had that same, or a similar conversation, and he went out and bought what he called his condo. So I think the technical word is the columbarium. But it's really powerful because then when I go back to Calgary and I go home to visit, I have a place where I can go and visit my father. And because we, you know, had the service there, I go back there and I like Dad, and I can talk to him, and it's really powerful.
What I love from what you're both saying and what the people we were chatting with on the street were saying is that not everybody has the same wish, but everybody there had a preference as to what happens.
We have life insurance, we have car insurance, we have home insurance, we have all these insurances to protect us in case something does happen. Doesn't it make sense to have something in place for, you know, something that's going to happen?
We should accept that it's going to happen. We should plan for it, and we should communicate it.
When I die, really good advice.
We'll be right back, but first, let's hear more about what you have to say about your final journey.
My view on that is I think people have a difficult time talking about stuff like that.
And several of my friends, unfortunately, have left us, and that's what they've done. Arranged with family. Yeah, when I check out, party time.
CARPE Diem. Seizing the day for Canadians as we age.
It's now time to go around the table for our panel's final thoughts on prepping for death. Rose, go first.
I think the most important thing that we touched on earlier that relates to the legal world is that it's our executor who's vested with the power to handle our final decisions. As a consequence, having a properly drafted and documented will can be worth its weight in gold. And a will isn't the only tool, and it isn't the right tool for everybody, but the only way to know what works for you and suits your circumstances is to talk to a lawyer. Most lawyers within Canada will often provide a complimentary consultation. So again, that fear and that cost really shouldn't be a deterrent to getting the information you need to make an informed decision. Within BC, there's a concept called the Wills Registry, which operates through the Department of Vital Statistics. And most professionally prepared wills will have a component offered to a client that says, we will lodge a registration there. This gives your family that peace of mind that if you have, for lack of a better word, dropped the ball and failed to communicate this to them, after you pass, they can go to any lawyer or notary in BC and they can run that search and at least have a mechanism to find what those documents are and where they're located.
There's a big difference from the people that have prearranged their families when I sit across from them as a funeral director versus those who have not. You know, relieve some of that doubt. The more information you can give your family, the better off they'll be, because you have the option to pre-plan today. It's peace of mind. You're going to get what you want, your family knows what you want, and it's documented. You're safe from inflation, and you have the financial options now. So we're really pleased to say that all CARPe members get 10% off of all of our professional services, our cemetery property. So all you need to do is go to dignitymemorial.com and find a provider near you to start the journey of pre-planning.
Get the fear out of the way.
I can assure you there are hundreds of thousands of people who have pre-planned, and guess what? They have that peace of mind. It's a weight off of their shoulders because they know they're going to be taken care of and their family's going to be taken care of when it's time.
And Wanda, final thoughts.
When it comes to preparing for death, I think it's really important to realize we're not alone. We have great lawyers that can help people make decisions, can give us advice, like, gee, maybe it's not a good idea to give your 18-year-old full access to their inheritance, or if you've got a family member whose spouse you don't like or you don't trust or you think maybe they're a gold digger, lawyers have options that they can give you to help you get around that. And when it comes to planning your memorial service and planning how you want to die, great to talk about that beforehand. I personally used to be an officiant. I used to do ceremonies of celebration of life. And it was an amazing time to connect with families and learn about their wishes and have these celebrations that really honor the person who had died. And my friends would say to me, Wanda, isn't that really depressing? Like, how can you do that? And it was absolutely the opposite. I would do a ceremony of life and help people grieve, help people remember. And then I would come out and it would be like the trees were greener, the flowers were brighter, or the rain was wetter, but just everything was more alive, and I would realize how precious my family was and how great my life is. So when we avoid the darkness, we don't get to see the light by contrast, and it's that darkness brings out the color of the tapestry of our lives. So I really encourage all our viewers to plan, to make a will, to talk to a lawyer, to plan their memorial service, to talk to a funeral director, and to make sure that that's off their plates so they can have the best possible lives for every minute that they're living.
Very good advice. And Rose, thank you so much. Jennifer, and of course Wanda, always a pleasure to have you here. And that's the show. And remember, as our CARPe president Moses Neimer always says, the best way to keep going is to keep going. So stay zippy, and CARPE Diem sees your day.